I suppose people sitting at home will be worried in a large degree that just walking down a road in any city in the United Kingdom, sort of seeing a 2-ton white van might now be a rather worrying experience for some people. What is your advice to people in perhaps busy areas who might feel slightly perturbed by these events today?
Well, I think it's quite broad, Tom. I mean, to be honest, we've seen vehicles being used as a platform for attack by various different individuals, groups, terrorists, all sorts. So I think realistically, most people are fairly pragmatic about it. I think that a lot of people today will have been reminded that we're actually at a substantial level in terms of the UK threat level, which means that a terrorist attack is likely. So, you know, most of the time, I think the vast majority of us will go about our daily lives, unless you're working in the sector like me, and not really need to think about it or worry about it. And I think people, you know, fundamentally need to be generally situationally aware, you know, just for their own personal safety against being robbed or mugged or assaulted in the street by some ne'er-do-well.
It is interesting because this incident has all of these sort of similarities to terrorist attacks that we've seen in recent years, whether it's the sort of random stabbings or the van being used as a weapon. But the police aren't treating this as a terror incident. It's likely it could be somehow gang-related random act of violence, perhaps a mental health incident. It's interesting that the police in Nottinghamshire aren't treating this as a terror event, at least at this stage.
Well, you know, again, they haven't confirmed that. They haven't confirmed that they're treating it like a terrorism event, and I think it's too early to call it. And I think the fact, although Mark made some very, very valid points, you know, they haven't called a Cobra meeting, which is usually a trigger from the back and is an indicator and a confirmation. Nottinghamshire Police's statement later is obviously going to be, you know, hopefully the tell-all of exactly what is going on here. You know, from my experience, 30 years odd of doing this, I had drawn certainly a lot of parallels, a lot of indicators, a lot of signatures to this being potentially a terrorism event or certainly being treated as one. You know, we look at the very, very broad cordon initially, the very heavy multi-agency response. We were looking at trams, trains being diverted and buses being diverted, obviously, out of the city centre. We're looking at, obviously, a number of individuals that have turned up on scene or certainly been eyewitnessed, including military. So, you know, there are a lot of things which would say to me, and particularly the methodology and the modus operandi of the attack. We're looking at 3 people killed. We're looking at 3 different locations. We're looking at 3 people injured. We've heard of a knife, a very large knife being held by the perpetrator. We've looked at the vehicle actually being involved in the injury of a number of individuals. You know, the one thing that I've discussed with a lot of counter-terrorism sort of counterparts has been the time of day. And the one thing was the time of day, which is put into question.
4 a.m. Yes. Very, very odd. If you want a big impact for some sort of attack, if you were thinking like a terrorist, wouldn't you want to hit people at commuting time or sort of in the middle of the day? Isn't that much more usual? Yeah,
you're absolutely right, Tommy. You're looking at a maximum sort of number of people, you know, high population in a particular area. Depending on what the attack is, whether it be someone with a knife, someone with, you know, an IED, or someone who's using a vehicle for that matter, you want to get mass casualties. So the one peculiarity, the one question mark is obviously about the time of day. Now, that doesn't necessarily rule out it still being terrorism, because we've certainly seen occasions where individuals have accelerated their plan when they felt that they were going to be potentially apprehended. Now, we don't know at this stage, we may not find out even in the future, whether this individual was actually already under surveillance, whether this person was known to the authorities. But the one thing certainly from Mark's report, which is pushing me towards the fact that this is possibly someone that was off-grid, someone that they were not aware of, is the fact that they're actually going to their commercial premises. They're going to a number of other locations. There's another address I think Mark mentioned, which they're also investigating and searching. So that would say to me that they don't already have a profile on this individual, and they're exploring every opportunity and every motivation. The person they have in custody, again, depending on how willing they are to talk and to obviously be participant in any interview process, will again tell us an awful lot, which I'm sure, hopefully, we will hear about in the press conference, the official press conference later.
That's an incredibly interesting insight. The fact that there are all of these different searches, meaning that the police are almost trying to build a profile
Correct.
on this individual. And whether it's terrorism, whether it's organised crime, whether it's a random act of violence, it does seem that in sort of modern-day security thinking, perhaps our security services are actually really rather good at finding the plotters, at finding those who are organised. And it's the lone wolves or the sort of, spur-of-the-moment individuals who go off and do this stuff are the ones that slip through the net.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those are, and again, don't be deceived by the fact that if this individual comes out with some low-level criminality in their history, that exempts them from potential terrorism. A vast majority of terrorists that have been apprehended or been involved in major events have been involved in some criminality at some point in their lives, so they'll be known to the authorities. Now, again, one of the things that Mark mentions, and again, I go to Mark's very, very astute report, is the chronology. What happened when and at what time and in what location. And those are the key things that I would want to know, and will also build a picture as to how this situation evolved and possibly even the motivation. Was there a targeting list or was it random? Again, were the victims known to the perpetrator or were these unfortunate individuals who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, Tom?